What's up, gang? Hope you're doing well. This video is going to be chapter 2 through, I think, 6. I've read through chapter 7 now of Transforming Basketball, so I just want to talk about my findings through 2 through 7. So if you remember in the previous one, it was about chapter 1 and the preface, and basically talking about my critiques and what I agreed with, what I disagreed with. The main thing I disagreed with was just the framing of the book. It was more so just like the direction it was coming from. Like I said, it felt like a sales pitch to try and sell the constraints-led approach, which is fair, completely get it. Like, you write a book, you get to do whatever you want. But then it also felt like a resume builder. So talking about the things that Alex Sarama himself has done and why his methodology should be better, whatever. So it's not that big of a deal. And I think a lot of people in the comments, you're thinking I don't like constraint-led approach, or that I'm somehow trying to discredit any of this. This is all for discussion. And there's a big gray area right now, like traditional style, static coaching, and then the more like ecological dynamics, constraint-led approach. Then there's a gray area in the middle, which kind of uses both of those, right? But if you speak to traditional coaches or you speak to CLA, they will say their frameworks of how learners learn is completely different. So they don't work together. It's either this or this. So that's my issue with it. And I largely suggest new coaches, if you read this book, if you understand Transforming Basketball, if you go just watch Alex Sarama's podcast, if you listen to him speak on constraints-led approach, it will almost certainly make you a better coach and make you reframe the way you think about coaching. So I want to get that out of the way first. The disagreements I have are that next level up of leveling up your coaching, and even parts that I think Alex Sarama himself lacks a lot of experience in, or just completely misses the mark on certain things. So chapter 2, for example, there's a part here, he talks about skill, and just says it's simple, but basically says it's unknowable. So when people talk about dribbling, shooting, passing being a skill, he's like, that's wrong. He starts explaining it in a really complex way, but I understand what he's saying, but don't get caught up in, sometimes we use language not to be scientifically correct, but we use language to communicate ideas. So when someone says you need to work on your skills, to me, I take that as, yeah, you need to work on your shooting. You need to work on your dribbling. You need to work on, basic like jumping and rebounding. You need to work on those sort of things, kick ahead passes. All of those can be skills. Typically when these conversations are being had though, between theorists of these two types of camps, they will say like, technically you can't, you don't know what a skill is, or we can't call it a skill because a skill is actually, and again, that's where I just start. We're drowning in trying to distinction of words. Communication is just a language. So sometimes when people say fundamentals, it just means your building blocks. You need to work on those building blocks. When they say skills, shooting, dribbling, passing, rebounding, communication, whatever, those can all be skills and those can all be worked on. We can disagree or have different ideas on how those skills are developed, but just to say that it's unknowable is just, it's nonsensical to me. He takes a lot of quotes from players. There's one in here I definitely had a problem with. Diana Taurasi was talking and she said, shooting is a feel. It's more of a feeling. And then Alex Sarama took that as, see, it's not the skill and it's not a motor learned skill. It's something that it's hard to explain. It's something amorphous, basically. But if you also look into how Diana Taurasi trained, if you look into how she developed her skills and her shooting, she was very rigid and very rep heavy, very static drilling with a lot of things too. So again, I don't like that this book takes so many quotes from players and then turns them into different quotes. The CLA and ecological dynamic camps do this a lot. They did it with that Bruce Lee quote. I fear not the man has mastered 1,000 kicks one time, but one kick 10,000 times, and then they'll turn that around upside down and it to mean the opposite of what Bruce Lee was actually saying. So anyways, those are those couple things. One point I agreed with, he says, we should not be giving solutions without identifying a problem first. If you guys have watched my channel, I mentioned that a lot. Like, I definitely think Too often coaches will identify like, oh, here's how you need to do this. Here's how you need to do this. Here's how you the step back, for example. We were watching that one coach teaching kids how to do a step back and said, the reason you're missing your step backs is because this. And it's like, well, they're probably missing step backs because they can't shoot normal threes, right? So when people identify problems before or have solutions before they identify a problem, I think that's a huge deal that most coaches do. I agree with him saying players self-organize in different ways, but where this can be misleading. So he basically says, don't tell a kid how to shoot a layup. Everyone's going to shoot a layup differently. Actually, you guys let me know if you like the notes on the screen in my face. Don't teach them how to shoot a layup. Everyone's going to just self-organize in a different way. I do agree to some extent, but some moves are optimal, more optimal than others. So one thing I talked about here is like the baby hook. So teaching that little jump hook that post players do, shielding off with the offhand. Yes, if you can finish that with your inside hand through contact, like you may have success, but you're at some point going to reach a level to where that doesn't work anymore. So then you'll have to go back to the drawing board and relearn it a completely different way. We might as well teach it that way to begin with. If the kid's just not good at it anyways, might as well teach it the proper way. And I say proper, that's something else Alex Rama would be very against. He states that fundamentals contradict self-organization tendencies. So exactly what I just said to you. If I teach you to shoot the baby hook the right way, sorry, bless you. If I teach you to shoot the baby hook with the offhand, like clearing out space, if I teach you to shoot that before you've learned how to just play and figure out all these things on your own, Alex and most CLA coaches will say that that's less beneficial to the player than them figuring it out. If they figure it out on their own, they'll be better off. The problem I have with this is, especially using my own brain and the way I work, time is limited. We don't have infinite time with players. Putting them in an environment where they're safe to explore ideas and try things out, but where you can also just give them, like sometimes I just want to just give me the solution. What's the best solution? I'll try that out. Oh, it's working. Let me move on to the next thing. I just want to move on. I don't want to spend 3 hours trying to figure out like what's the best way theoretically to shoot a baby hook. There's a reason that some of these skills, and I'm going to use this word again, it's going to piss people off. There's a reason that some of these fundamentals have stayed fairly consistent from the beginning to where we are now. It's because it works. So I feel it's giving kids and players a head start if we can give them some proper fundamentals, some things to build off of and explore off of afterwards. That's where fundamentally I'm probably different than the CLA group. He brings up, so here's something I brought up in chapter 1. So we might actually only get to chapter 2 in this episode. One thing I brought up in chapter 1 that had me nervous, or not nervous, but just one thing I don't think CLA accounts for very well is mastery. So skill mastery. There was a study done on blacksmiths and just said, like, you would think the top blacksmiths in the world have practiced this rigid technique over and over and over so that they would all have the same, they would all have a similar technique when we judged where their hammer strikes landed. But what he found was the more expert the blacksmith was, the more differentiating the angles were whenever they were using their hammer, and their hammer strikes would hit in different spots or with slightly different rotation of the wrist. The more expert they were, the more that varied. So CLA takes that study, and this is where the studies can say whatever you want them to say. They take that study to mean, oh, the more expert you are, the reason they're expert is because they swing and do things all these different ways and end up with the same results. I actually look at that study to mean that no, once you master a skill, once you master its techniques, you can begin to bridge off of that a little bit more, and you have a little bit more freedom to change angles and change things up throughout that practice. So I look at that study completely different and almost backward, almost opposite of what CLA does. And again, that's where some of these, I think, theories kind of fall apart a little bit. This one is results driven. If a basket is scored, then, so some of his phrasing in this does come off very results driven. it basically says, like, if you give the players a solution, let's just say we're playing 3-on-3, and I say, hey, we've got to go pick and roll, and you have to hit the slip because they're going to double. So you have to hit the slip, and then that's how we're going to score. If a player comes out of the double team and doesn't hit the slip and they dribble through it, let's say, and then they go score the basket, Alex Sarama says CLA wants to say, no, that was the right solution. As long as we scored the basket, as long as we got the positive outcome, it was the right solution. Where I think it contradicts itself, and CLA leaves a lot of leeway for itself in, oh, well, we can just change this. Oh, well, what I meant was, whereas it will say traditional coaching isn't allowed doesn't have all those allowances. If I'm telling a player to hit the slip, it's probably a specific reason, because let's say our best player constantly tries to get through double teams, and that's why we're losing games, is because the other teams are doubling him and he's getting exhausted before the fourth quarter and he ends up with 12 turnovers and we lose by 15. If that's happening all the time, when we're running this drill and I'm telling you to hit the slip, that's the only way to score, and then this player's finding all these different ways, it's like, okay, we all have that one player. Everyone's had that player that goes, when you tell the team to do something, they're like, but what about, or what if he does this, or what if he does this? Sometimes you need to be rigid in your game plans. Sometimes basketball does call for rigidity. Sometimes you do need to do something a specific way to get a specific outcome. If I'm playing defense and I see someone split a double team and then still go score, I just go, hey, stick with it. Can't do it for 4 quarters, right? Oh, we'll just bring more help next time. Like, there's more. I think there's more that goes into this that I think the CLA doesn't fully account for, or if it does, that traditional style coaching can also account for that too. It's the same thing as the blacksmith thing. This is saying no action can ever be repeated. So it's saying, like, if you strike at a 90-degree angle, it's like, well, technically that was like 90.132. And I'm like, once we start getting reductive like that, nothing can ever be repeated. But nothing can ever be exactly identical. But like, our cells change every day. So I'm not the same person I was yesterday. Like, what are we, at that point, what are we doing? So I think there's a lot of things that sound like they make sense, and they try to use all of these to bolster up their studies. But to me, it does the opposite. To me, it's, if you've taken one thing and you've stretched its meaning to fit your narrative, I could just do that same thing on the other side. So I don't think it proves your theory any more than what I thought before. It doesn't account for high pressure environments when conscious movement is necessary. Oh, okay. So here's another one. I also think where CLA struggles is high. So how I said, I don't think it accounts for mastery very well, skill mastery. I also don't think it accounts for high pressure environments. So when conscious movement is necessary. So what I mean by that, I use this example a lot, but Steve Kerr, when he was playing for the Bulls, and he used to say, like, I just sit on the bench. Whenever I was training, I just sit down for 3 minutes at a time. And then I'd check in, I'd walk to the bench, I'd check in, and then I'd sprint down the court, catch and shoot 1 3-pointer, and that would be my rep. And then I'd go sit down for another 3 minutes. He's like, because that's what I would get in a game. When you have 1 rep that's going to happen, your brain starts thinking. Your brain does, I don't care who you are, your brain goes into overdrive. And it's like, wait, so when I catch it, do I want to spin the laces to catch do I want to spin the laces and find the seams before I shoot it? Wait, do I want to go into my dip? Which finger am I shooting with? What am I looking at when I shoot? Oh, these are the things going through your brain while you're waiting for 3 minutes to go shoot, right? If you've never been in those high pressure situations, it's really hard to explain, but because I've been there multiple times, and then the remedies that I've found to fix those was directly like static repetition, static drilling. Sometimes like that's as good as it gets. So game pressure free throws. When you go to the free throw line and you're shooting a game-winning free throw, it's not a normal free throw. Your body starts shaking, your legs start shaking. Like, it is a different free throw. I know some of you have shot game-winning free throws in men's league or something like that, but I'm talking about when you're overseas and if you miss and your team loses and you get sent home, you lose a job. That's completely different than just playing at the Y. But I've been there. Your hands, everything starts shaking. And we were down 2 points, 1 game. And I got fouled on a 3. And I went to that free throw line. I was so nervous. The first one, I don't know. I just shot it and it went in. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. Shot the second one, went in. And then by the time I got to the third one, I felt like, okay, I got the pressure off, made the third one. So we ended up winning the game, but I told myself I'd never want to be in that situation again. So that's when I started practicing and go, hold on, when I get nervous, what am I going to tell myself to calm my body down? And that's where I got, as long as it leaves this finger last, I shot it the right way. Because when I shot it with, I thumbed it a little bit. I shot it with like, my fingers were stiff. It was just, I just put the ball up there and it went in. But I got to where, as long as it leaves my shooting finger last, and as long as I shoot it straight, as long as I do those two things, like, I'm okay. And what I found from that point, the next time I was going to the free throw line in pressure situations, I was just telling myself, like, yeah, a couple bounces, like, get into my dip. And it's just like, as long as it leaves this finger and I shoot the ball straight. And the way I built that up was reps on reps on reps of just practicing that thing over and over and getting that confidence that that's what was working. Those are my shooting cues I can give myself. So whenever I'd be practicing before a game, that's what was going through my head. So anyways, that was a long way to say, that's where I think static drilling really did help me. And that's where I've helped tons of other players in some of those same scenarios. And I can't think of another way to replicate that with CLA that wouldn't also apply to traditional coaching, right? Does that make sense? So let me know if that story made sense to you guys. He also says teaching skills 1-on-0 can't translate because there is no context. Again, it's just like, how reductive do we want to get? You're never going to be able to replicate game situations exactly, like 1-to-1. So at that point, if CLA happens to be better for a specific thing, then that means training 1-on-0 can also be effective. Again, it just needs to be, there needs to be like the proper context there, or you need to know why you're training. I've said that since the beginning of time, right? As long as you know why you're doing a drill, like, then you can go back to the drawing board and see if it worked. And that's another thing I said, you can imagine context and you can speak context. So if I just put players out there 1-on-0 and I say, all right, we're going to go full speed. Perfect example. Our whole channel is full speed right, full speed left. The amount of times I put young players like on a cone and just say, okay, full speed right. And they just go full speed right. I don't tell them which foot, don't tell them how many dribbles, none of that. Hey, full speed right, go make a layup. Then I can start adding context. Hey, let's imagine there's a defender and you have to jump off 2 feet. Okay, go. So they go full speed right, land on 2 feet, and they finish. Then I go, hey, imagine that defender is walling up and you have to step around him. Land on 2 feet, step around. I don't tell them how to do these things, but you can imagine context. You can imagine these things, and it can all be 1-on-0. So I largely agree with just the all or nothing that Alex kind of preaches in this book. One of the things here, he says Shaquille O'Neal would have been a better free throw shooter with more exploration and freedom of motion rather than rigidity. I think that is also another thing of like saying Shaq would have been better if he did CLA, is basically what he was saying here. And I'm like, well, Shaq probably would have been better if he just statically drilled his free throws too. Like I don't think he cared that much. And honestly, Shaq said he was a good free throw shooter in practice. He said he couldn't make them in the game. So it's like, we don't know. That's just something you're throwing out there. And it could have made him worse, could have made him better. But that's not making a scientific based argument, and they preach scientific based approach. Can't conflate the two. That's basically chapter 2. I thought I'd be able to get through chapter 2 through 6 in this, but I didn't realize how many notes I've taken. Yeah, a lot of notes. So we'll get through these one at a time. Maybe the next few chapters I can get through a little quicker because there's far more agreements I have in there. So chapter 1, chapter 2 is really just setting up a lot of like why you should try CLA, why you should trust Alex Sarama, why CLA is the best approach and why traditional coaching simply doesn't work and why it needs to be thrown away. But the issue again I have with these studies have been around forever. This same type of rhetoric has been around forever where it's saying this is better, no, this is better, no, this is better. This is just the new wave of it. But again, the main thing I want you to take away from it, this is a good book for if you're an inexperienced coach and you need some ideas about how to think about training and teaching and coaching. This will put you on the right path. I promise you, it is a very good book. I just don't want you to get caught up in this is the only way, because it also leaves there's going to be a lot of coaching. There's going to be a lot of skill building. There's going to be a lot of other things left on the table. And I'll get to those the more we cover this book, seeing as how I've read the next few chapters and some of the things I agree and disagree on, and then you guys can go make your own decisions up. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. If you want me to continue doing this whole series, I'm doing this for myself because I'm going to make a big video on the next channel, but let me know if you want me to keep doing this chapter by chapter, or if you want me to give you just a big overview once I'm finally done. I should be done pretty quick. Either way, let me know. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one.